Hello. Thank you so much, Hefe, for that lovely introduction. I always thought that life was linear. We went from A and we go to B. I had finished my degree in zoology. I took a couple of jobs and I thought, this is how life is going to go. But I missed where I grew up in Tunisia, North Africa. I missed the sea. I missed the sea's creatures. And I decided it was time to go to the Red Sea. Very good for the soul. I needed to go diving. This was in 1990. And I went to the tip of the Sinai Peninsula called Ras Mohammed, or Mohammed's Head. And I went on a dive, 15 other people with me. We go around Mohammed's Head, Ras Mohammed, and there we are out in the blue. I look around, nothing. Look down, look behind me. None of my dive buddies are with me. But then these guys all circled me. I stopped counting at 50. And that was a moment of epiphany for me. I'd always been told, sharks are scary, they're out to get you. These guys came whizzing around my head, inches away from me, 50, 60, 70 animals, all close to 6 feet long. They couldn't care less about me. And all I could think of was how beautiful and graceful and amazing they were. Everybody else was stuck up against the wall. And I was out in the blue going, ha, ooh, ha. They all thought I was absolutely nuts. So obviously my life was no longer going to be linear. So I want to take you on a little bit of a journey about this now non-linear life. And with it, all the people that I've had the incredible privilege to be able to work with on this amazing journey. Because of course, as the people closest to me know, I'm very hard-headed. So one epiphany is not good enough. I needed a second. And at this point, I'd been working in Guatemala with the UN, fabulous, but I knew the sea was calling me again. And I skipped over the border to Belize. They needed somebody who was a dive master, degree in zoology. Pick me, pick me. And I'd heard that there was a lot going on at this particular site called Gladden Spit. Seemed to be a lot of fish being caught, a lot of action, and we were hearing from local fishermen that there were really large sharks coming in as well. So of course, I just said, this is for me. So left the UN job, crossed the border, went into Belize, and started working with traditional fishermen to better understand what was going on at the site. And one fisherman in particular, Eloy Cuevas, is somebody who has accompanied me and my team along with most of this journey. Amazing man who can stand at the back of a Panga Lanchon, 25-foot open boat with a little outboard engine with a cigarette dangling from the side of his mouth in 6-foot seas and say, yep, it's over there, without ever getting the cigarette wet, without ever losing his composure. An amazing man who features during the course of this journey. And what he led us to was incredibly huge aggregations of fish. The fishers, myself, other researcher colleagues rolled over the back of this Panga Lanchon, and immediately we were surrounded by thousands of snappers, thousands upon thousands, and they were there to reproduce, to produce eggs and milk at a particular time of the year, April and May, full moon. They cued into the full moon. They don't have cell phones, so that's how they know to all come together. And this is a picture of them spawning. Sorry, it's low resolution. I didn't have very good camera photography skills then. It's much better now. And sure enough, what they had told us existed in this site. Large, large sharks turned up as if on cue for the dinner buffet, the caviar buffet. This is a 30-foot shark that is being completely engulfed by clouds of eggs. Imagine how many thousands of fish have to produce an opalescent cloud of this size. And that was it. I don't need more than 2 epiphanies. This was epiphany number 2, and I think we don't need another one. These are 2 of my research assistants who are meeting Mr. Facey, fabulous whale shark with lots and lots of character. And that set me on the track to not meeting B, going completely in a different direction. And that was almost 20 years ago. So what did we do with all this newfound knowledge about spawning aggregations and whale sharks? Well, one of the first things, all the fishermen whom we were working with said, well, where are they going? What are they doing? What are they eating? Why are they here? How many are there? They had tons of questions. And would you know that all of those questions that they had have formed the basis for just about all of the whale shark research that is now conducted in the world. But when I started, there were only really 5 of us, most of them being in Australia. So this was kind of a brand new open field, a lot of trial and tribulation, did a lot of tagging with these new satellite tags that can actually tell you where the animal is whenever it comes to the surface. This is one such tag developed by Wildlife Computers up in Redmond, Washington. Amazing group of innovative people, and I've had the pleasure of working with them since 2000. And one of the cool things, too, is this one will give you the location of the animal whenever it's near the surface, so you can start tracking the animal. You get emails sent to you. It's like the whale sharks going, I'm here, and I'm here now, and I'm over here now. So you can start really building up a pattern of their movements. And over here, I'm sorry you can't see the red square very well, but this is kind of the area that's like a thumbprint for this species, and you can uniquely identify these animals. So with the help of a wonderful database that's run worldwide by Jason Holmberg and WildMe, if you ever encounter a whale shark and you have pictures of them, please upload them to whaleshark.org. He's absolutely phenomenal, quite a brainiac. So through all of this work, we were able to actually get to know better what these whale sharks were doing. And one of the questions that I get asked a lot is, well, do they mind the tagging, etc.? You tell me. This is 2 seconds. I took this 2 seconds after tagging this animal. So there it is on a tether. It's a little torpedo tag transmitting its location. We're off the coast of West Africa here because I've had the wonderful privilege and honor of working in a lot of different countries with this particular species. And this is magnificent. We have 2 traditional fishers from West Africa who, for the first time, they're swimming with whale sharks. And they were always terrified of getting in the water with these enormous sharks, never knowing what would happen to them, and they did that. And now, I have to tell you, they are stalwart shark conservationists. They absolutely love these species, and they're really trying to spread the word against actually fishing other species as well. These are the largest fish in the sea. They grow to be 60 feet. They can live over 100 years, is estimated, and they don't reach sexual maturity until about 30 years for females. They are the most prolific. They have up to 300 young, and they can pup in a conveyor belt system. So their young are called pups, and they kind of come out in a conveyor belt fashion. They're also really cool because they never know when they're going to meet their next mates, and they can store, the females can store sperm for up to 2 years. A really cool strategy. So I don't think I want to do that, no. I've had my kids, I'm done. So all to say that this helped us develop this incredible pattern of movement around the Gulf of Mexico, Caribbean, and even beyond on whale sharks. And it helped us really identify one of the biggest aggregations in the world. And this is a picture, all those little yellow dots are whale sharks. So one of the questions is, what are they there eating as well? And what we found was that they too are eating eggs, but this time not of snappers, of tuna. And this has become a really, really important aggregation site for us to study over the long term, and especially in relation to climate change. So how the currents are changing in that area, how they're affecting upwelling, food sources, and such. Like the Ginsu commercial, but wait, there's more. At these sites, these aggregation sites, they tend to be high productivity, so you've got a lot of other species coming in. And at this particular whale shark site in Mexico, near Cancun, you also have mantas. And it's not just any manta. In 2009, my colleague Andrea Marshall found that mantas are not just one species, they're two species. And a putative third species has now come up in this area called the Yucatan manta. So there we have this giant that can measure up to 7 meters or over 20 feet in disc width, and they, too, are living in this aggregation and foraging optimally or finding the food optimally. But they also run under threat. What we found with the satellite tagging of manta rays in this site was that it's great to have a marine protected area declared for the whale sharks, but the manta rays are having none of it. This is the area where they tend to aggregate according to food sources. And it happens to sit in one of the biggest shipping lanes in the entire region. These are whale shark fins, and mantas also aggregate in the same place. So, we're trying to work to see how we can mitigate the impact of shipping on these large animals, because they're very important also, not only to the ecosystem, but to the economy of Mexico and fishers. This is a gratuitous shot. I'm sorry, I have to include it. It's my son, and he's holding a satellite tag. He was instrumental in looking for and finding satellite tags, and I have to say, he has got incredible eyesight, so I always drag him along in the field with me. And there are a few mysteries that remain. This is just a whale shark pup. We know that they have up to 300. They're all head, and we barely ever see them or find them. So where are they pupping exactly? And that's something that we don't know, we're still looking for. So we've got a lot of information now on whale sharks, quite a lot on manta rays. We can still fill in quite a few gaps, especially in the eastern tropical Atlantic. But what about the 1,200 other species of sharks and rays, and also the deep water chimeras, etc.? In the backdrop of commercial fisheries for sharks, which are massive, we're losing millions upon millions of sharks a year, and not only in the large-scale fisheries, but also in the nearshore coastal artisanal fisheries. And it's not just for fins. The fin trade has been very, very important in the decimation of sharks, but it's now increasingly, in fact, responsible for close to 73 million sharks taken when it was estimated in 2002, and we think probably less now because there are just fewer sharks around. But what we're finding increasingly are the demand for meat. And where you're seeing an extirpation of sharks, they're now going after the rays. And rays are almost more vulnerable than sharks. We're finding that 24% of all assessed species of sharks and rays are actually endangered to extinction at this point, as determined by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And you think, well, what is the demand? What's pressing for that demand? And in this particular, in our particular neck of the woods in Central America, it is actually the Lenten season that is driving the demand, especially for shark and ray meat. And what we're finding there is that shark and ray fishing ramps up in November, December. They're taking in thousands and thousands of animals, and they're salting them and drying them, and then they're crossing the border, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and all of those areas. So we're slowly, unfortunately, decimating the populations of these sharks. And one of our mission targets is really to reduce the demand and the consumption in shark and ray meat. And there's another reason for that too. The human health implications are not good. We've done a lot of toxicological work on shark meat, and we've found that they're very heavily integrating heavy metals, especially methylmercury, which is a potent neurotoxin. Curios, if you go and you see shark jaws or shark tooth necklaces, you might want one on the wall, you might want to wear one around your neck, but I would just say please don't, because it just fosters, again, more demand for these animals, and we're really trying to reduce that. And like Hefe mentioned when he introduced me, one of the things that we're really trying to work towards is mitigating the impact of unsustainable fishing techniques. And one of the most unsustainable fishing techniques is actually the net, the gill net, the shark net, nets in general. Why? Because you might have protected a species, but if you haven't actually done something to ban or reduce the use of these gear types, such as nets or long lines, then they're going to catch these protected and unprotected species indiscriminately. So manatees, sharks, turtles, all kinds of different finfish are all caught in these nets. This is a wonderful iconic shot. It's sad, but wonderful iconic shot by Brian Scarry, National Geographic photographer, of Alopius, a thresher shark caught in a net. And we have many such pictures. So one of the pieces of work we're doing is to try and see how we can transition fishers over from use of these unsustainable fishing methods into more sustainable hook and line, and finding some economic diversification schemes for them to make up for their lost revenue. You might think, for those of you who know the Greenland shark, why am I putting up a picture of the Greenland shark? I think it's to bring home the fact that a lot of these species have such incredible, vulnerable life histories. You had the opportunity to hear from Dr. Laurie Marker previously, and from what I know, cheetahs reach sexual maturity at about 2 years. A lot of cats and dogs in less than 1 year. Well, the Greenland shark really hammers it home for us how vulnerable these animals are. Recent science shows that these animals reach sexual maturity at 150 years. And they may live to beyond 400 years for the females. So you can do the math. It's simple. You can't really take a lot of these animals without really impacting. And one thing I do want to get across is I'm not against fishing. I love fishing. My children go fishing. But you need to have fishing that remains within the bounds, the biological boundaries of these species. And I wouldn't touch these guys anyway. They're full of contaminants. So. Another thing that thwarts a lot of the conservation work that we do is we don't even know what we have in most of the countries, especially tropical developing countries. We don't have numbers. We don't have, like, for example, the lion. We know at least we've got 20,000 lions. We're pretty close on that. Elephants, 350,000. We have no idea, except for some small population areas where we've done population estimates on very small number of species, how many sharks, rays, chimeras, and skates we have. And so that really thwarts our conservation efforts, and that's something that we're really actively working towards, and we're trying to work at the community level. And it's really important that we know these numbers, because before us, within my lifetime and many of your lifetimes, in our region of Central America and the Mesoamerican Reef, which encompasses Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras, we have lost 2 species of sawfish. These were over 20 feet long, now critically endangered in the world. There are 5 species in total in the world. We haven't seen any of these in our region for over 20 years. So, just to say that if you're going to try and approach or embark on conservation of these large, long-lived species like sharks and rays, but also turtles and large finfish, because they are threatened by many of the same threats and they have similar life history characteristics of longevity, late reproduction, and such. You need to attack it from all kinds of fronts. You can't just do the research. You also need to do the capacity building at the community level. You also need to do education and outreach. You need to connect with the protected areas managers, and you need to connect with the policymakers, very important, and help shunt all of this great information that you're gathering into policy making for these very vulnerable species. And that's exactly what we're trying to do so that we can restore a lot of these populations that are in decline. And you'd think 1,200 species, my God, that's a huge amount. How are you ever going to focus? So our focus really is primarily the Caribbean, but we also work in Micronesia and West Africa and a couple of sites. And we work with reef-associated coastal species, because that's where we can really, really have an impact. So everything from the sharks and the rays that I mentioned, but also turtles. Caribbean hawksbill takes 35 years to reach sexual maturity. They're now critically endangered to extinction. But, you know, with a lot of the bans on turtle harvesting, you're finding that these animals are starting to come back in the Caribbean. Loggerheads, and of course, one of my favorites, the large Goliath grouper. This little juvenile here that I tagged can reach 8 feet in length. 8 feet. It's the second largest grouper in the world, and they're phenomenal. They're not the brightest of fish. Why do I go for the not so bright fish like whale sharks and Goliath grouper? I don't get it. But anyway, but they are phenomenal in that they grow to be very large predators and architects of the reef. And that's a black grouper. So that's to give you an idea of some of the finfish that we include in our work. And I think throughout this journey, I think it's worth talking about the journey that we're on right now. So here I started work with traditional fishers, and I've basically dragged them into our new work, which is establishing these much needed baselines for these large marine wildlife, the sharks, the rays, the turtles, and the finfish. And we use these very simple methods and technologies that many people can adopt. And the more people who adopt them, better, because then it means that we can monitor their populations, we can see whether policy is having any effect, we can see whether protected areas are having any effect, and we use camera traps. You heard about camera traps? Well, we use the same thing, very, very cheap, PVC with a GoPro and some bait at the end of the arm, underwater visual transects using snorkels, keep out the dive gear, much easier, and then of course catching the animals themselves so that we can actually measure them, sex them, take samples for genetics, and tag them and track them. And this is one of the key areas that we've been working in, working closely with a whole host of different organizations and governments. Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, and Honduras, and these are all of our permanent sites where we're establishing these baselines and putting down the bruv here with the baited arm. And these are some of the species that you can see on the bruv. So yellowtail snappers. So this is great because although we may not study yellowtail snappers, we've got a lot of other people who want to know about yellowtail snappers. They want to know about morays. So the information that we're deriving from these techniques are helping a whole bunch of other scientists to do their work and to make estimates for those populations and those species that we may not work on. There's a southern stingray flapping in down. We like to call those sea flaps. And manta rays are majestic sea flaps. That's a colleague of mine, Simon Pierce, who termed those. This is a nurse shark. They're the bane of our lives. They're the puppy dogs of the sea. They'll mouth anything. They'll rip the bait cage off. When we come back without a bait cage, we go, oh, it's another nurse shark. This is what we love to see, the Caribbean reef up there. And look at that. We've got a beautiful big fat Nassau grouper right over here. Stunning animal to see underwater. I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a tiger shark experience as well. This is off of West Africa. That bait's good. I think he likes Oda bait. So that's a juvenile male, and do you know that it's a juvenile male and it's still only 2 meters and 60 centimeters in length, and it's still juvenile. So it takes a long time to reach sexual maturity. I won't show you the end because I don't want to, it basically runs off with the bait arm. I should have included that. But just to give you an idea of some of the information that we're managed to get, because there's only so many conservation dollars. So you have to focus. You have to focus if you're going to have any impact. So these types of this type of work, for example, we just conducted in Roatan, it tells us that most of the species of concern are located on the east side of Roatan in the Bay Islands, and notably, quite a few of them are actually seen in the marine protected area. So we might actually be having a positive marine protected area effect, which is really great to know. I'm showing this because we spent a lot of time in boats, and we don't always have a canopy, and it's very hot, and the guys get bored, and so they're checking their phone, and they're hiding behind buckets, and we're doing better. We had a recent donation of a boat with a canopy, so we're extremely excited. So no more buckets on the boat. And of course, in order to allay a little bit of boredom and to gather more data, we do our underwater visual transects. We are swimming over 1 kilometer every time. We do up to 7 of these transects a day. So yes, I have thighs of steel. And just to give you and put in perspective what we have swum in the last year and a half, we have swum all these yellow points, and that basically is San Francisco to Seattle. And just to give you an idea of some of the information that we can derive from this, we can start seeing exactly where we're getting big concentrations of rays. And this is Lighthouse Reef Atoll off the coast of Belize, and we can start seeing the frequency with which we're seeing southern stingrays and another what we call Caribbean whiptail ray. And we overlay that on where fishing is occurring and where sharks are occurring. And we start to get a really good picture of the spatial ecology of this species. And this is just from gathering data on sea turtles. What stands out immediately, here's Mexico, sites in Mexico, here's some sites in Belize, and here's sites in Honduras, and this really stands out. So this is telling us that Roatan has a lot of turtles. So if we need to focus any conservation on turtles, we know that we're doing okay here, but we might need to work a little bit more in Mexico or in some of these like northern and southern coastal areas of Belize. And when we're doing these transects, we come across some of the other things that we can help with. Nets. When nets are left behind, this is what happens. They keep fishing. They wreck the reef. And so we go down. I'll have you notice that we're on tanks, and Percy here is freediving. I would like to just mention the fact that these fishermen are amazing. They can freedive to over 100 feet depth. And we have folks who say, we can freedive, and they're like, yeah, come and join us and see what these guys do. They're really quite spectacular. And when you think that they've run out of air, they kind of shunt over here and they pick up another lobster, and then they pick up another conch, and then they finally come up after they've had a coffee and check their internet. So, and they love that part of the work that we're doing. And this is great because then the third piece of work that we do is actually checking the lines. We set lines with hooks because that's the only way we can catch the sharks and the rays. And the guys themselves have learned to catch, tag, and release these animals. And that we've seen a huge change in attitude with the fishermen, and they know how to release a shark safely. That was one of the big concerns before. We tag, and then we release it with this lovely photo from Tony Rath. That's a Caribbean reef shark. Believe me, if you think the shark looks scared, you should have seen Tony's face as well. It's like, you didn't tell me you were going to release it right in front of me. Anyway. And they check the cell phones one more time because there's a lot of messages to be sent to girlfriends. As I discovered. Here is our Honduras coordinator, Gabby Ochoa, fantastic woman who in between the long lines will go out and, spear a lionfish. They're invasive species in our waters. So if you see lionfish on the menu when you go to a restaurant, please eat it. Ask for more lionfish. And of course, it's very tiring work, so we have to rest a little bit. But I just want to show you a couple of quick things that we do get from the long line work, some of the data. And that's all the yellow points that you see up here are all the points that we've sampled with long lines. And the orange points are where we've actually captured hammerheads. They are one of our key iconic species. They're endangered to extinction. Their populations are down in areas where they have been monitored, for example, in the US waters, by over 90%. So we know that those populations are suffering big declines, and as you can see, we barely caught any. In over 70,000 hooks, we only caught 5 hammerheads. So we know we need to focus on reversing that population decline, and they mainly get caught in nets. So again, that emphasis on nets. And if you didn't know that sharks use Facebook, now you should. We actually acoustically tracked sharks with these little pinging tags which can tell us where they are in relation to one another, and we found that certain of these aggregation sites for fish, because they exist at Lighthouse Reef, are dominated by these big females. And I can understand that, because when there's a buffet, I'm like, stay away. This is my buffet, no, don't touch that. And I'm big. So I can totally understand how these large females are reacting as well. They have to produce several pups. Usually it's a year-long gestation. I would not want to be pregnant for a year. I've done it twice, not a year, 9 months. But I certainly understand them. And now we better understand the network of sharks in some of these areas. And they have such a connectivity. They like to hang out with some, but not others. And that becomes very apparent in some of the work that we're doing. So I have to bring up Jaws, because we've managed to change attitudes with fishermen. We've managed to create these baselines, information where we never had any before, but we still haven't changed public perception. Jaws doesn't help. Neither does Sharknado, which I have to confess I have not seen yet. I must see, but I've seen little excerpts of it. And it also doesn't help that we don't have cuddly, furry, sweet little creatures like tapirs to promote. But we do our best. This is Beto the bull shark, and Beto is a wonderful hugger. And what we found is, who knew that kids in Belize and Honduras, Mexico, and Cape Verde love to be hugged by sharks? But apparently that's exactly what so if we go to public outreach, a lot of hugging going on. But what we're finding, where we're finding changes in an excitement for sharks, is through the education. We have a big educational program throughout all these countries. And here's Hilmar Salazar, a traditional fisher who fishes part-time, but also is part of the field team, and he loves education. And increasingly, he's engaging with students. We use a whole host of different tools. We just incorporated microscopes recently. We got a donation from the Houston Zoo, and it's been an eye-opener for not only students, but also adults. We have reached over, at this point, 35,000 people in the public through our different public outreach events, and notably students in classrooms, over 2,500 students in classrooms. And we use things like this wonderful poster on anatomy in 3 different languages, English, Spanish, and Portuguese, to inform, educate, and really inspire, and all of our classroom work as well. And we love to measure. We want to see the changes in attitude from one to the next, before and after the work. Aha moments like I had with the sharks in Sinai, with the whale shark at Gladden Spit, I want that for everybody, because they really are life-changing. As I said, I was hard-headed in the first one, but I got it in the second one. And I like to try and make that available to as many people, and especially local kids. And it's been really quite life-changing for several. Several of them are actually working with us as volunteers. They come and help us in public outreach, and they've actually gone on to work on marine projects or in marine protected areas. And here 2 university students said, Miss, can I touch the shark? Can I touch the shark? And I said, of course you can touch the shark. And now I see what they're saying on Facebook whenever something comes up about shark fishing. And they're there like, don't touch the shark. What are you doing? Are you crazy? Don't be fishing shark. So we've created this massive, huge group, coterie of shark ambassadors. And it's really important to us that we build capacities with fishers, with students, with partners, because we can't do it. At MarAlliance, we're only 12 of us working in 7 countries. We can't do it all, and we don't want to do it all. We really, really want to create these champions, like Hilmar Salazar, our wonderful field coordinator, who's now transferring a lot of skills to Henry Mesquita from Mexico. Henry, I just took to Honduras, and he trained a whole new cohort of 20 fishers. Evaristo Muschamp, who is leading up the fisheries work. And with all of them, we're bringing them all together in different regional workshops so they can share all their skills and talk about how do we make small-scale fishing sustainable, and how do we mitigate impact on sharks, rays, turtles, and such. We also work with the tourism sector. Very important. 1 in 4 people in Belize is employed in the tourism sector, and marine tourism is very important. So we like to promote good practices. We like to frown on bad practices. We work with the guides a lot to try and stop them from flipping the sharks over, etc. So if you go to some place and they say, hey, touch the shark, or hey, when you grab it, please don't. Please don't, because I will know. This is me in the water with policymakers. Hey, it's great. You can sit and have a chat in the water and watch sharks go by, and it's more likely to have traction. And of course, strategic partnerships are absolutely critical. As I said, we can't do it all. And here I'm working with the Mexican government in the whale shark zone itself. We're looking to see how we can expand, potentially, the whale shark marine protected area to encompass that area where the manta rays are and where some of the other whale sharks are actually aggregating. So I'd say the tide is really, really turning for sharks. I'm so excited. We're seeing much more high-level policy making, more protected areas that are being enacted and created for some of the key sites for sharks, like nursery sites where they're actually growing up, or important feeding sites like Gladden Spit, which we made into a marine protected area with the help of the Belize government. And so I'm very, very hopeful. But we need to get the message out. We need to mitigate the threats, and we need to expand our reach even more. So you might ask, how can I here in San Rafael or in California help sharks and rays and even turtles and large fin fish? Well, one of the first things that I would say is eating less meat and also less seafood. I know it's hard. I know you love meat, but eat a little bit less. It makes a big difference. When you choose your seafood, use your Monterey seafood card. They're fantastic. They really, and if you come across lionfish, eat as much as you want. Eat away. Use less, consume less, use less plastics. Be very conscious. We are seeing plastic pollution first and foremost in these regions, and it's really terrible. And we don't have any recycling where we live. Support conservation efforts. I would say, very importantly, come and visit the sharks and rays yourself. This is really important. You can give a voice to these animals, and they need as many voices as possible. I just thought I'd throw this in because this is what I did last Sunday. This is in Honduras. It's a great shark dive. And there were 14 Caribbean reefs, tranquilly swimming around. Oh, you see, that's my happy place. It's my happy place. What can I say? But as Eleanor Roosevelt says, do something every day that makes you just a little scared. It means that your life will not be linear. And you wonder about Eloy? Eloy's still with us. But now he's a fly fishing guide. He no longer fishes commercially. And he's in the back, right here. But right in the forefront, when I started out working at Gladden Spit, there's this 4-year-old son, Evan Cuevas. This is 1998. 2017, here's Evan Cuevas. He is now a part of our core team. He is phenomenal. He is so phenomenal, I sent him to Micronesia to teach sustainable fishing techniques and free diving to the Micronesian fishermen. And he rocked it. And we were immensely proud. And so we're in it for the long run. This is what we do. We work with fishers, we work with partners, and we try to save sharks and rays.